Have you ever stopped to think about how much of the old stories may have actually just been people, like, straight up at that time they were seeing something that we just don't see anymore? Think of the captains claiming there was a sea monster out there, some huge squid-like creature known as the Kraken, bringing down ships and sailors to their doom. Or the ships literally returning with physical signs of a giant sucker that had attached to the side of the ship and caused damage. While dismissed then as ridiculous, and the fact that some dude on land was like, no, that sea captain who's been out there for 40 years, nah, he's just crazy. But we now know there is a Kraken out there. It is known as the Colossal Squid, and if a boat was small enough, it would absolutely pull them down to the briny depths, killing everybody. It's human nature to simultaneously tell stories about things that we see and dismiss them as well. We do that because I think in a lot of instances, we may just not want to believe it's real. But way back in our minds, or at least our species' collective minds, there is a part that does believe everything that we hear might be real. In the events of the shrine, this idea is quite prevalent, as a reporter and the lackeys she brings to go with her investigate an area where people just seem to keep disappearing, which they don't tell anyone that they're going there or bring any sort of countermeasure. Super smart. It appears that an infection of sorts takes hold. But what exactly is it, and is it supernatural? Let's discuss that in today's episode covering The Shrine. We kick off this story with this one being an indie film, My Body Is Ready. Also, I admire the commitment of Call Me Red, 6026. I kept telling him that this was a supernatural movie, so the science may or may not be as steadfast as usual, but I'll be damned, it didn't stop this guy from asking. This one's for you, big dog. As we phase through the nth dimension into a door opening, a group moves through Resident Evil 4 style, tying the man down to a sacrifice table. Clearly, they move something over his face, as Sadler says something, I don't speak Polish, as they bring the hammer down and basically force the mask into his head. Jumping over to the shower scene, because this movie has no self-control. Wait a minute. Hey, wait! Is that Dean Winchester's girlfriend? I always wonder what happened to this actress. I guess she was doing movies in 2011. After the absolutely necessary shower scene, not Dean talks to her as he's upset at her for being on her phone. Who's she texting? Inquiring minds wish to know. She claims to be swamped with work as it turns into a low-energy fight, and he leaves. Wait a minute, I've heard this one before. Probably just move on there, brother. Over at her job, she's being given a story on bees when she wants to do a story on someone who went missing. A guy named Eric is her boss. Not relevant, but I just made you use 20 joules of energy to make you learn that information. Haha! So, people's luggage turns up without the people, which is enough for Lisa, as she is informed she shouldn't chase that story and probably should just focus on the bees instead. Eric, you're boring, bro. So Lisa and Sarah then head over to a woman's house, flashing the FBI badges to get information on Eric. I think this is his mom, and she says that he's officially a missing person, and the police will get to it when they could. European police. No different from American police, really. Missing people are hard to find. Lisa then goes upstairs to Eric's room and then starts snooping through his stuff as she finds his diary. Dear diary, today I'm going to Prague to hopefully not be sacrificed. That's his last entry. That sucks. Walking downstairs, confirmed Eric is his mother, as Lisa then brings up the journal as she says she wants to spend some time with it. A literal nightmare. This is why you will never catch me writing down my feelings. If I go missing, I'm just gonna remain a mystery forever, the way the good Lord intended. Reading the journal that night, Lisa's window is open, and for some reason she hears someone whispering Carmen outside. Wrong name, get the salt. Someone then appears at her door as it opens, and they convulse. Get the salt. Turning around, Bloody McBloodface then yells at her to leave him alone, as then she wakes up, and you'll find out this was actually just a normal dream for her. There was no part of this that was even like super, she's just dreaming about this. So going to meet not Dean, she invites him over to have the trip of a lifetime because it's the last one anyone will ever take. He's a great photographer as she wants him to shoot all of this. He's informed the police aren't doing what they need to do, so it's up to her, a random chick in the US, when it's a Polish issue. Okay. She tells him to think about it as then she heads to work. Lisa's boss then gives her another story on bees and how they're dying off. This man is obsessed with bees. I mean, so am I. I like bees, but I mean, it's a bad thing if bees die off, but it's also important to remember there are roughly like 20,000 pollinating species of insects in the US alone. It's not just bees out there pollinating. Just want to point that out. So trashing that story, not Dean then calls her to tell her that he will go with her to the spooky haunted area of Europe where people keep going missing and they won't bring any sort of countermeasure. Welcome to Kozki, Poland, probably. Wait, the Polish people are driving on the correct side of the car? Absolutely based. Lisa then tells not Dean about the entries in the journal, talking about how in the village a fog would just sit at the boundary and then not move, and overall the place was pretty suspicious. Passing some women who are hanging their clothes to dry in the woods. Would that not be better in sunlight? I mean, I'm not gonna knock it, maybe they know something I don't. So walking through town, everyone then stares at them as they pass by one guy cleaning a pig. Sarah is like, oh, that's sick. Like, where do you think meat comes from exactly? This is part of the process. So spotting a youngling on the edge of the woods, they approach her asking if she speaks English. Meeting Lydia, Lisa then talks about how they're journalists from America. Honestly, the worst kind of American you could ever meet. Truly, a horrific first experience. Big Papa comes out from cleaning the pig as he tells something to her, as then they decide to leave his property. Good plan. Walking through the Polish hillside, cool town. They come upon a church in the distance as Not Dean then asks if this town is Christian. Well, I believe that's probably the standard over there, correct? I don't know, small towns in Europe, seems like it would be. So spotting the fog in the woods, the elders then watch them as well. Going to approach it, the butcher grabs Lisa and then tells Not Dean as the elders start yelling at them. Hoofing it out of there, he says, "Nothing here for you, English," which, whoa now there, brother. First off, do not confuse Americans with the English, all right? That's like confusing any other country on this rock with France. I mean, those are fighting words. Second, a certain point with our dialects diverging, American is probably going to become its own language in like 500 years. It's sort of like going 500 years in the past and trying to talk to somebody over in England. You probably wouldn't understand them. So glad we could settle that bit of patriotism issue. Don't call us English. Getting back to the car and heading out, Lisa then tells Not Dean that they need to go back. She deduces that the fog was the only place they didn't want them to go. Lisa says if she doesn't pursue the story, her career is finished. Rallying the troops, Not Dean is officially in. Pulling off the road, I mean, you could probably just approach from a different direction. The elders, they can't be everywhere at once, right? So entering the woods and listening to Roanoke because he's a happening dude with gratitude, they make it to the heavy fog that's just there. Well, this wouldn't be alarming. I, for one, would not be going in there. Totally good on that front. So saying it's too dense, they decide to head in anyways and check it out. Bro, no shot without some rope am I like to follow a path back. So calling out to Sarah, she has already entered the fog and disappeared. Yeah, that was stupid. Not Dean then says they should get out of there and just leave Sarah behind. Heroically, of course, as Lisa then runs in next. Letting her take point on that as a hero. I mean, why not just keep calling out, right? Okay. Alright, I know what this fog is. You don't really know what this fog is yet. They should totally be able to hear each other, is all I'm saying. So turning around, she has completely lost sight of Not Dean. Whatever. Calling out for Sarah, there is no sound in the woods. That's not ideal. That means there's no animals in there with you, or even like insects, which, if those things are avoiding an area, you might want to avoid that area too. It's when the forest is silent that issues arise. So hearing something panting around her, also not ideal. Not Dean at this point decides it's been too long as Sarah emerges from the fog. Her face is cut, and he asks what happened. She asks where Lisa is, as she's informed, well, she went in looking for you. Lisa, however, is totally lost in the sauce in there. Essentially emerging in a clearing of sorts, she finds a humanoid figure. Don't approach that. Not listening to Roanoke because she doesn't believe that he's a happening dude with gratitude. It appears like a gargoyle holding something, probably a heart. Taking a picture of it, she then sees its head is now turned looking at her. One of those angels from Doctor Who or whatever? It's basically that situation. So that means run. It begins crying hydraulic fluid, as in the rock. In its hand begins pulsating in a heartbeat. Getting lost in the sauce for a moment, she comes back out too, before backing away from that thing. Good idea. However, now she can hear something moving around in the fog around her. Running out of the fog, she has emerged as well, to Not Dean asking if she was hurt. She asks Sarah what she saw, as Lisa reports she saw it too. Hoofing it out of there, oh good, Lydia's here. Lisa then asks her, what is she doing there? And she reports, well, I know where your friend is. Well, not really a friend, more like a work lead than anything. And we don't even really care about it. You know what, Lydia? Don't worry about it. We'll come back with the cops. So taking them to a creepy hillside shed. He's in there? Great. We'll come back with the cops. Heading inside, Lydia is totally chill about entering this creepy location, which is not ideal because what youngling is not going to have at least some trepidation about entering a location like this? Big red flag. She opens the door and then leads them in. You know what, Lydia, why don't you go first? And as they do, they find a bunch of caskets. Pulling the tops off one, they find people with their heads basically like having the masks jammed down on their face, and taking pictures of this horrific turn of events. Tattoos are seen on one of their hands. They find Eric completely desiccated as they try to take off his mask, but it's stuck. Looking up, Lydia has bailed on them. The door has been locked. Bro, that is a rickety shed. I'm kicking through the wall. Hearing whispering, they are able to get the door open as they decide to head back to the car. Fantastic plan. Of course, now they are almost lost, I guess, as the village people have found them. Sarah then stops from running as, I don't know, she didn't do cardio in the US. Our food is crap over here. That's why you gotta focus on being healthy too and actually doing cardio. And she's completely out of breath. So running into a barn, which I'm sure the locals wouldn't think to check at all, don't worry about it. They hide for a moment as Sarah's side is hurting her. Yeah, it's called your spleen. You just take a few deep breaths. Not Dean says that they should not have come here. I think you rightly deduced that, but you did agree to come here, man, so live with your decisions. So Lisa then embraces Not Dean, as the locals have found the barn, and we all know what's about to happen. Jumping down, Lisa gets grabbed by one of the locals as Not Dean gets taken down because he's not Dean. Pretty Boy then hits Lisa in the head with a piece of wood as the butcher straight up arrows to the knee Sarah. I don't even know if that was the correct way to say that, but Not Dean actually knocks the dude out who is fighting him, as Sarah gets chloroformed by what appears to be a monster. The butcher now goes after Quasi-Dean, as he's much faster for some reason. Pulling his knife, it turns into some good old-fashioned CQC, but Quasi-Dean gets knocked out, as then he gets choked. Being woken up with water being dumped on them, they are all tied up as Sarah starts puking up the hydraulic fluid from the statue. Butcher is talking to Lydia about something, but I don't know, Polish, as then are brought to the elders, as Polish saddler, Solish, Paddler? I'm gonna go Solish. Face slam down onto the keyboard name, I'm sure. Because have you ever seen a Polish person's last name? It's like QWERTY keyboard sort of stuff. Anyways, he talks to them, but bro, nobody can understand you. I mean, it is your country, so I get it. But Quasi-Dean is then taken away as Lisa and Sarah are brought down to the shrine. He said it, oh my god. Being relieved of their stuff, that's not ideal. They are then given their customary white shirts that everyone else has on that was sacrificed. As Solish then approaches, he just sort of stares and then says something. Sarah is then grabbed and taken to the Chamber of Doom while Lisa is locked up. Strapping her down, I don't know, at a certain point you gotta approach this like being the third monkey trying to get on the Noah's Ark. And brother, it's starting to rain. Every limb you got attacks every eyeball in the room, sort of scenario. So looking at them though, a lot of these people are clearly creatures and not humans, although we'll discuss that. Cutting her radial artery, Solish then starts saying something as, oh god, they go for the Achilles. Solish then turns into a creature next as Pretty Boy holds Not Dean at force multiplied point as he then argues with Baldy. Sarah is straight up bleeding out over there as then they bring the mask over her face and then lower it near her eyes. Using the hammer, I see, they bring it down onto her head, which blasts through the ocular cavity and into the brain, leading to a rapid bleed out. Well, that's not a pleasant way to go. As Quasi-Dean then keeps digging, Baldy keeps yelling as he uses the shovel to smack the force multiplier out of his hand and hits him with the shovel next. Brother double tap that dude. Going to get Lisa now, Quasi-Dean has now been upgraded to Dean Adjacent because he keeps surviving. Entering the ritual area, Sarah is then placed in a casket as the smell down there has got to go crazy style. Seeing Sarah being placed in the casket, Lisa then spots him next as she's brought out. Pushing the guy in the cell, they then lock the cultist in the shrine area as Lisa starts throwing up hydraulic fluid next. Hearing something talk to her, Lisa is starting to trip. Dean Adjacent says they need to go back to the farmhouse for some reason and then get the vehicle. I guess that would be the reason. What's this? American craftsmanship in a random village in Poland? That's right. This is a 1951 Ford F-Series. These bad boys actually, for their time, weren't bad. They came with a 226 inline 6 or a 239 flathead V8. Now, this was nothing like what it is today. The V6 only gave you around 95 horsepower, and the V8 produced around like 100 to 110 horsepower. Basically, a Honda Civic nowadays has 150 horsepower, just baseline, with the Type R having 315 horsepower. And the gas mileage for a Ford Series, you're talking like 7 miles per gallon at the lowest, and like 15 claimed at its highest. Never believe any of the forums when people are claiming to get like 25 miles per gallon on something. They're lying to you. But essentially, it was just called the rule of cool back then. That's why everything looks great. But they are underpowered as all get out, and the fuel consumption went crazy style. I'm partial to the square body era myself. Just something about a 1970 Ford F100 on 33s. However, I will still take my 2000 Tacoma because I have built her and I love her. So Dean Adjacent then says he's going to get the keys as they enter the farmhouse. Hopefully he won't have to do some super cool backflip kick, breaking some random woman's neck. Approaching her with stealing intent, she calls out as Boy Toy comes down next. Looking at Lisa, the wife then starts freaking out as the cultists are breaking actually out of the cult pen. Tying up the family, y'all are wasting a lot of time with this. Lisa then starts hearing something outside as she starts hallucinating, asking where the keys to the truck are. Dean Adjacent then threatens to take out the old man here as Lisa is now becoming entirely lost in the sauce, seeing monsters everywhere. Finally, they are informed the keys are in the kitchen. Don't know why that took so long. I mean, I get it. I wouldn't want anyone stealing my 67 Impala either, but you can always get another Ford F-Series, brother. I'm just saying. This is like, where am I going to get a Volkswagen truck? Which we're going to talk about that here in a minute, but Lisa is also totally losing it. Dean Adjacent then ties the youngling to the stove as Lisa continues hearing voices and seeing things. Turning and seeing herself in the mirror, well, I think it should be facing you, right? It's not good. Seeing her hyperventilate, the face is completely changed as Lisa then lets out a scream indicating her location to the cultists. Way to go, Lisa. Dean Adjacent then hears Lisa call out as he walks into the room that she was in. He asks if she's alright, but she's not really giving any straight answers. It's not good, as then he starts hearing laughing, doors slam, and the man and woman in the other room are then torn apart as then the youngling is next. That is also not good. Welcome to the wonderful world of actually literally becoming a hunter, I guess. This entire episode is completely supernatural coded. It's gotta be an extension, dude. So as the door then opens, he sees the family is in fact torn apart and the youngling was eviscerated. Doors keep closing around him as you are completely being hunted, dude. Like, you gotta get out. So getting tackled by Lisa, well, she does appear to have slightly changed. Whatever it is, reports it's tasted the flesh and blood of fallen angels and there is no redemption. That's not good when something says that. So then the God Squad bursts in, which I guess what we're really dealing with is a lord here. They're not cultists. Oh my god. Dude, one guy just totally gets his neck torn off as others try to attack her one-on-one. Why are you guys doing that? Attack all at once. Solis then appears to try to exorcise her as she's now taken out 3 of his men. Using the holy water, it goes full on exorcism as the main guy then gets stabbed with a piece of wood. I really wish I could understand what these guys were saying. Turning back towards Dean Adjacent, Butcher then steps up to take her on as then he puts a sword through her while exorcising her at the same time. Holding her down by her hands, they get the mask ready as Dean Adjacent then holds her head straight and then the demon asks him for help because, you know, last little bit of mental trauma that demons like to inflict on you as a treat. Squaring up with what's left of the God Squad, the Butcher then says something, but as to what? Again, I have no idea. Somebody who's Polish, tell me what was even happening. With the battle concluded, Dean Adjacent now gets taken back to the more strange time of when Volkswagen actually made pickups back in 1983. Dude, okay, I don't know what's with the European vehicles. I don't know. The word Eurotrash gets thrown around a lot compared to American muscle. Some people really like European vehicles. Some people are wrong. I get it. I don't get it, actually. I don't get why you guys like European vehicles. It's just, they sound weird, they look weird, they behave weird. German cars are over-engineered to the 10th degree so that when like one control arm on your 8th tire blows up, you now have to just replace the whole vehicle. I get it. I know American vehicles, especially American muscle, could be more simplistic, but I'm sorry. I just can't get behind anything European when it comes to vehicles. I'm trying to think if there's something that I actually like. Somebody's probably clicked off by now. No, I can't think of a single European vehicle I would want. Now, Asian vehicles, like I said, man, 4Runner, Tacoma, Lexus, American Muscle. It's just, I don't know what you guys are doing over there. Anyways, so before I get too off topic here, which I already am, Dean Adjacent is then informed this thing will take him wherever he needs to go. No thanks, I'll walk. Also, oh, you can speak English. Okay, so Dean Adjacent then asks what's up actually there in the trees, and he's told basically it's just a curse left there on their land from long ago, and it cannot be undone. Not even with a nuke? Are you sure? Alright. And thus concludes the Shrine. Welcome to the science portion. I have no idea when I started saying that, but it does feel, I guess, kind of right. So clearly, I guess you could say something supernatural is going on here, but it's taking place over the ocean, so, or at least across the ocean, so we all know the usual playmates are unlikely to show up and help out. Can't drive across the ocean, it seems. I can relate to it. Personally, I can't stand flying. That's why I drive everywhere too. Anyhow, so what we appear to be dealing with in some capacity is a curse of sorts, but the question we have to ask is it really anything to back that up, or is it just simply beyond standard human reasoning as of right now? As I always like to maintain in most of my videos, I'm not against the idea of the supernatural, but I guess in and of itself, it's really just a lack of human information to the brain. Back in the day, humanity truly believed there was a sun god. If we didn't worship the orb in the sky, it might get upset and then not show up the next day. Further compounded by the fact that when an actual solar eclipse would take place, it would scare the holy hell out of everyone. I mean, even with the knowledge that we have now, have you ever seen a solar eclipse, like honest to God, like been? Not in the penumbra, but in the umbra of it. It's actually extremely unsettling to your, I guess, stress system, even if you know what's really going on. It makes you really aware that there is a giant rock out there orbiting the Earth, and we are really just along for the ride. And that's with us knowing that these aren't like celestial beings, just celestial objects in a very balanced dance. But with this line of thought, humanity has always sought to place the world around us into boxes, knowns and unknowns. Within the unknowns box, corporeal and ethereal exist. However, when it comes to the ethereal, that's when we tend to get a little freaked out. At least with Earth-based matters that we may just not understand yet, there is a chance that maybe we could grasp the concept and learn about it at a later date. But with the ethereal matters, this goes well beyond our current technology level, which then puts us pretty far outside of at least an ability to even begin to grasp what's going on and how it could be sort of, countered. Has this been a word salad for the last 2 minutes? Probably. But anyways, this is the realm I typically operate, moving the thing from the ethereal unknown to at least maybe the corporeal unknown, which that's pretty much what we're going to do today. Well, at least 80% of it anyhow, because there are still a few things that are not 100% going to fit in that box. So the first thing we need to establish is an understanding of the environment itself, because this will tell us a little bit about what's going on here, and then I can also make some assumptions based on that. You know what they say about assuming? It makes an ass of you, but not me. There is no me involved, just you. Don't look any further into that. So when entering the Mist of Doom, we see there are very clearly plants here, or at least there were plants here. Given some of the trees are still standing, the longest trees with the hardiest wood still stay standing about 1 to 2 decades after they have already met their end. But what we can assume, given the butcher says the curse showed up a while ago, is that the elders were probably very likely the first to notice it. And given trees, like their physical form, but dead, are still there, let's say this curse showed up likely not terribly long ago, probably within the last 50 years. I don't imagine it would be any longer than that just by the visual cues that we see within the environment. So this essentially means that this is not some ancient event. It's probably something taking place in the 1900s, which is actually when I was born, and they have been dealing with this ever since. And given its location and relative isolation, it's kind of just been a localized issue. Now, the other thing we need to try to figure out is, why did this happen? Well, if you aren't aware, I have a second channel called Roanoke Tales that is actually catching some traction because I stopped uploading once and then disappearing for 3 months. A, you should go check that out. And B, we have been covering the concept lately of Eastern European holes. Phrasing. There are 2 main ones that we can look at that might actually help to explain what's going on here. The Sarashina hole and the Huska Castle. The Sarashina hole, which I have a whole video on, essentially is it's kind of strange. The Bulgarian government started digging a hole as they thought there was treasure there. However, things in the forest started allegedly showing up at night. Soldiers went insane, saying that they were seeing things. Machinery broke down in the actual dig site with horrific regularity. Kids hiding the remotes. Real sick stuff. It was alleged something was found down there, but the hole was eventually sealed up with concrete. The other one, the Huska Castle, actually had its walls built backwards, allegedly in order to contain something. Remember, these are real places. You can actually go visit them right now. Huska Castle in particular is quite strange, as the building of the castle, as you might guess, is no small feat. Windows only face the courtyard instead of outside. The defenses would be placed facing inwards, and people actually say they have seen and experienced things inside of the castle. One guy from back in the day claimed to be transported to the modern age, seeing people dressed strangely, talking strangely, and holding devices made of light. He would actually write that down, and then he's dead now, obviously, because it was way back in the day. And now we have cell phones, and a lot of the things he wrote kind of match what we do today. It's very interesting stuff, but the point is, in real life, we see in this area that holes are in the ground, and they appear to really scare people. The question always is, why? Well, relating it back to this movie in particular, let's assume it is much like any other aforementioned area, then this would likely indicate that something in this specific geographical location has breached. What has breached? As Lisa moves through the area, it's not just dead plants, but it's also the immediate loss of outside sounds, and along with that, a very clear hallucination that she is experiencing. So what is going on with this particular area and the actual experiences of Lisa and Sarah? Well, as we take a look at their symptoms and the progression of them, I'm going to do what I always do. This to me looks purely biological, at least to a degree, and then from there, it treads into something that humanity really does not understand. That doesn't mean it is some ethereal and unknowable event. It just means we don't have enough information on the topic to begin to speculate. That's not what I'm here for, and that's not why you click this channel. So brother, it is time to speculate. Also, as a heads up, the meter is still running. Dude really needs to check on that. The first symptom happens rapidly once breaching the barrier that is considered to be a fog. Spoiler alert, I don't think this is a fog at all. It's too unnatural for the patterns of mist, and the fact that it exists at midday is a question of physics not lining up with reality. Because of that, I believe this to be a biological coating of the area, which we actually see this in real life. We'll kind of get there in a moment. As Sarah enters, she takes a breath and then breathes in this alleged mist. Immediately, she can't hear anyone, and the forest is silent because no other animal wants to be in that area either. Remember, if everything goes quiet in the woods, that means there's a predator nearby or something is wrong. So finding the statue in the middle, this area of effect is actually not that large. I would put this fog effect realistically at only about a 100-yard radius or about 91.44 meters in heathen units, and to cleanse our palates of having to say, that type of measurement, that's about 7.14 Betsy Ross flags. USA, baby. Anyhow, once you enter the mist, you receive a large dose, enough to actually inspire some real issues. As we have seen, emerging from the fog later will not save you, as your symptoms will progress past this point and become more detrimental as time goes on. Interestingly, given Sarah was in there longer, it seems her dosage of the mystery air was clearly higher, and as a result, her symptoms would progress more rapidly. When running, a higher heart rate, respiratory rate, and stress response actually made her more winded than usual. That is my assumption. She could have just skipped cardio way too many times. Look, I know, I love lifting weights and I hate cardio too, but at a certain point, you need to strengthen your heart also. Yes, I'm aware, it blows. So with her symptoms rapidly moving forward past this point, we begin to see Lisa follow suit, at least to some degree, with visual hallucinations. As just a short amount of time passes, eventually we see Sarah throwing up the same hydraulic fluid as the statue did before, prior to her being taken out by the Eyeball Poker 9000. Ouchies. However, that appears to be a merciful act rather than one done out of malice, given that we actually are dealing with the God Squad over here. So, then, what exactly is happening with this mist, so to speak? The reality is, much like many other locations, I would bet money that there was a hole that was dug, and upon that happening, they hit something, very likely to have been what they would consider the underworld, which may present as an infection of sorts. And this is a biology channel after all, but what form would this take? Well, given that this infection appears to be airborne and almost inspire immediate consequences, or at least near immediate, this is not a virus or bacteria or parasite, as those would actually take more time. Instead, I think that this is a neurotoxic fungi, and I believe there are several clues to help support this. Of course, this demonic fungus does have what seems to be apparent supernatural abilities, though it might just be a poorly understood mechanism, so we'll talk about those momentarily. But before we do that, we need to actually go to Tennessee, believe it or not, because this will help to explain what's going on here. So surrounding the distilleries there's actually a fungus that grows on trees, turning them black. And this is actually how the lawman would find illegal distilleries back in the day, as trees and plants would turn this blackish coloring due to growth of a specific type of fungus on them. Also, remember, if you pay tax on moonshine, then it's not actually moonshine. Real moonshine gives you four-wheel drive because you end up throwing up a lot and you drop down your hands and knees. You ever had apple pie moonshine? I drank a whole jar one time. That was really stupid. Thank God for that Kappa Delta carrying me back to my room. Anyways, to this end, it would be inspired by the release of what was known as the Angel's Share. Evaporation of the ethanol released from the barrels would help saturate, or not help saturate, but it would saturate the surrounding area, inspiring this growth. And this organism, known as, and I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you, this one's like a bad Scrabble hand, Bodonia campaniensis. Yeah, that's a good enough pronunciation on that. Anyways, it feeds on the airborne alcohol and exists in the air right now that you are breathing in. It just doesn't explosively grow all over the place because, as you might imagine, airborne ethanol is sort of hard to come by in large reserves unless you're directly next to a distillery. So this is what I think is happening here. At some point, these people within the last 50 to 60 years would have dug into something and exposed the air to this fungus that was already in the ground, which we know fungus likes to be in the ground anyways. This fungus from this central location can now spread into the air only at a certain range of the hole that likely exists near that statue. Whatever was there would likely have noted that this area, which would be people, was dangerous and then marked it with this statue. Over time, it is highly likely that its area of effect began to spread as well as fully engulfing the statue and the surrounding area, and given enough time, it is likely it would continue to do so. So then, how does the infection process work? Clearly, once inhaled, this would travel to the alveolar sacs where it would diffuse into the pulmonary vein. Now, typically the immune system would have macrophages patrolling the lungs looking for this exact situation, but the problem would be the sheer numbers of spores that you are breathing in. This fog is not a fog at all. It is a spore cloud, which is why it hangs suspended in the surrounding area. For this to happen, the wind would need to be pretty calm in this portion of the forest, and given the amount of hills in the woods, I'm kind of inclined to believe it. Not to mention, have you ever been in the middle of the woods in the summer? The air is absolutely stifling, and there is really not that much movement of it. Just a whole lot of transpiration taking place, and that's also why when it goes above the trees, it turns wispy really fast. like in the movie, and then just disappears because the wind is spreading it further, but it's not enough to actually cause these infections. So once the body is exposed to this many spores, it's likely that if you stay outside of the spore cloud while breathing in some, you would not really have an issue of clearing them from your lungs. And this is why, as Lisa stays there, what she's experiencing is a massive hallucination, because it's not just the spores entering her lungs and her bloodstream, as likely it might be able to bypass the blood-brain barrier. As she breathes in through her nose, they're going up to the olfactory bulb of the brain. Settling on this structure, this is what's known as the neurotrophic pathogen, or at least it's behaving as one, and it affects the neurons of the brain. Along with this, we all know the consequences of eating mushrooms. Not just on your pizza, but I'm talking like, the people who like straight up do mushrooms. They can claim to, like, some mushrooms can claim they're good. I'm not sure mushrooms would be claiming that. People can claim mushrooms are good. I myself probably wouldn't go for it. That's just where my personal limit is. Others are just, like, mushrooms and whatnot are just outright poisonous and can be lethal. And breathing in this spore cloud to this extent, as it's now saturating Lisa's lungs with the neurotrophic fungus, her olfactory bulb has been at least affected to a degree, and naturally, some would also move into her stomach and also be broken down there. The point is, the longer you stay in this spore cloud, the higher the dosage becomes. The moment they stepped in, their fate was sealed, which is why Dean Adjacent got really lucky by not going in there. But then, why sacrifice them? But once the fungus begins affecting the brain directly, it's important to remember where the olfactory bulb resides. And we'll talk about the spinal fluid here in a moment, but residing directly under the frontal lobe, if it can interact with the actual bulb by releasing neurotoxin, then there's really no reason to really believe it could not continue moving into other areas of the brain where the real issues would begin kind of cropping up, because, right next to the olfactory bulb, that's where your decision-making abilities come from. If you take a look at the brain, the initial entry point of this infection is alarmingly close to the lower areas of the brain, areas like the amygdala and the limbic system in general. As the neurotropic pathogen begins to affect the brain, from the first point of contact, this would begin causing the amygdala to fire and become disrupted. Along with that, the anterior cingulate cortex of the brain, located just behind the frontal lobe, would become involved at a certain point, responding to the neurotoxin. So essentially, what you have is one area of your brain is now responding with more aggression and fear, which would then, that's the amygdala. Next, your frontal lobe would start having issues with comprehension and planning, as well as emotional control, and the anterior cingulate cortex, which is supposed to help control anxiety, is also becoming dysregulated as well. So what you have at the beginning is a pressure cooker waiting for the right event to kick everything off. And then here comes the spinal fluid with the chair. As the blood passes by specialized structures, known as the choroid plexus, which are composed of epithelial cells, this will filter blood plasma. There is more to this process, but for our purposes, this is where the infection moves into the cerebral spinal fluid from the blood itself. Given that it can do this, once it's past this barrier, it will then enter the ventricles of the brain, where now it is no longer just the frontal areas of the brain dealing with the infection due to the direct exposure of the environment. Once getting to the ventricles, it will be exceedingly close to the limbic system as well as the occipital lobe. As this happens, life is about to get a whole lot worse, because now it's not just a feeling of paranoia, you will begin hallucinating. As Lisa sees a statue move and begin leaking fluid, it is likely that this isn't really happening at all. Much like the faces that she sees later, that's not happening either. Because you have to stop and ask, why would she be seeing the faces of demons if she's becoming a demon? The reality, at least to me, is just a clear example of a fungal species that is inducing what amounts to a really bad trip. After moving into the CSF, the olfactory bulb, and likely the psychoactive traits of the fungus being released in the stomach from the spores, it is highly likely after all this that she is really just dealing with her own brain becoming massively dysregulated because of the neurotoxins that naturally exist within this fungus. So the question is, why not get her to a doctor or just wait it out? Well, the problem is, given how successful this fungus is at actually invading the body, this is 100% something you do not want getting out of the immediate area. This would likely be an extinction level event should she escape and establish a spore cloud in a much more populated area. Really, this is the beginning of The Last of Us if you think of it. It's just being stopped by a small village in Poland. So then, what is there really to support my theory on the invasion of the body? I believe we see the best example when they crack open a cold one and open the guy's casket from the beginning. Evidently, this only happened just recently. I'm not saying you can't look different after a few weeks, but given his hands being as desiccated as they are, the reality is that something would have to be actively breaking him down. And you know what likes to break down dead tissue and also loves doing it? Literally fungus. So this is where the biological obviousness in my mind comes to kind of an end, because once the infection continues, that's where things start to get a little out there, I guess you'll say. As we see it progress with Lisa, because they lost track of her, first and foremost, she goes full on yellow eyes at a certain point as the neurotoxins in her brain have pushed her to full on psychosis, which given it's affecting the limbic system at this point, it's obviously like gonna be expected. This is what causes her to go full on bath salts and then freak out. It's not really all that of an unknown for people to be on substances that completely change how they behave, and they actually will have more strength kind of be exhibited in the process. Again, humans have way more strength than we think we do. Our brains just limit that strength. Don't let your brain limit you. Go bench that 405. Live or die, baby. Anyhow, it's also not uncommon for people in a state of psychosis to not only be violent, but to actually tear people apart if given the chance. Again, think of bath salts man eating face back in, I don't know, was it 2016? It's been a while. This is functionally what this neurotoxin is doing. Paranoia rises, fear takes over entirely, which then turns into pure panic. The limbic system is totally dysregulated, and eventually the occipital lobe, specifically Brodmann's areas 18 and 19, come into play, creating complex visual hallucinations, such as seeing faces or things changing around her, causing her to go full-on goblin mode. Attacking the thing she sees as demonic, that would be the family, before finally turning on the God Squad that shows up. Now, we do need to talk about the elephant in the room, the burning crosses. Clearly, that would be supernatural, right? Well, maybe. Given we don't really know anything about this fungus, and given the fact that these elders are not really using any sort of standard precaution or PPE, it's clear this fungus could, to an extent, be on all of them all the time. Now, this is stretching, so make sure to warm up and don't come at me, but if the fungus produces potentially volatile compounds on whatever it's settled on, then this may be kind of like the fungus, I guess, would be more sentient than we originally thought. If this is the case, then it could simply be that we are dealing with something that may know it's alive, and because of that, it can actually control other spores as if it were still like a part of it. Again, it is a stretch, but if it does produce volatile compounds, it may be able to ignite some objects by releasing these compounds onto flammable objects at the behest of a larger carrier of spores, which in this case is Lisa. Now, as for her physical appearance, you have to remember, she is saturated. Blood vessels are rupturing in the eyes and at the face from like the absolute toxic effects brought on by this fungus. I mean, she looks rough, but mostly it just seems like this could be caused by inflammation as well as ruptured blood vessels. The brain is in tatters, and the hydraulic fluid leaking out of her face is probably likely a combination of blood plasma and cerebral spinal fluid contaminated by the fungus itself. It is already known that if for some reason you're just chilling out and a bunch of liquid starts leaking out of your nose that is somewhat salty, it's completely possible that that is cerebral spinal fluid, and you should probably go see a doctor. Also, it happens to like UFC and MMA fighters when they get hit in the head. Sometimes they can leak CSF out of their ears. Given this happens already, I don't think it's some sort of demonic fluid phrasing. I think it's just contaminated CSF that is now discolored as the internal structures are breaking down due to the presence of this fungus. And finally, why did she come back at the end, at least for a second? Why do the eyes clear black, which is probably again just the fungus clearing the area? Well, this also is why it seems to imply there's a level of intelligence within the fungus itself. Realistically speaking, for this moment to happen, there is something that would need to take place in order to dissolve the effects rapidly, which means something would have to stop imposing those effects on her in the first place. To me, it seems like the fungus is something that has been undiscovered by man prior, or at least it's been discovered by this small village, they just don't know how to classify it. Given the area, it may be sort of like a perfect storm of a spore cloud that when invading humans, its process kind of begins to continue slowly, but it builds up and then overtakes the person entirely. Its purpose is to use a human as a vector to transmit it further along and further away from itself so that it can spread. The God Squad here would have noticed this at some point, which is why they have tasked themselves from allowing this evil to spread, because that's how they kind of quantify it. But really, it appears as though it's like an understudied fungus that may be showing signs of some level of sentience. But anyhow, I want to hear what you guys think. Is it a literal demon or just a mushroom? Let me know down in the comments. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and Roanoke Tales channel link, which we were talking kind of like about all this stuff, to be honest with you. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I want to thank our astronauts, Koosmith and Saucy Dub Socks. Thank you guys for your awesome support. Next, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death Dancer, and Mayura. Thank you guys as well. And next up, I'd like to thank our scientists, Stutz, Frank Shaftcrank, I actually love electric cars and the anglerfish, metric system, Invictus Echo, and and official Texan. Thank you guys as well. And the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate your awesome support. It goes a long way towards helping out, so thank you. But all right, guys, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.